your life.
Good morning. My name is David Moore, and I thank you for tuning in to the Sunday School lesson from First Baptist Church, Dunn, North Carolina. Of course, we want these weekly lessons to inform you about Christian faith and living that will help and comfort you in daily life. This week, our lesson is titled, "The Spirit of Herod Must Die," and the scripture is from Matthew 2, 1 through 20. Now, I admit the lesson is a repeat from last Christmas. So why repeat it? Because it is so relevant to the time and the culture in which we live. I sense more and more the spirit of Herod in society than ever before. Tyranny is on the rise. Selfishness is prevalent. Meanness pollutes the atmosphere. Hatred and prejudice have found new ground in which to grow. Division is the mode of operation in politics, religion, and business. And trust is in small supply. Cooperation seems to be taken as hindrance. Relationships have been devalued. And there is so much corruption in the culture to cause the stench of a cesspool. No, not all is bad, but for sure there is not enough good. The spirit of Herod is causing decay in our culture that could bring more destruction than a nuclear bomb. Am I being over dramatic? I don't think so. Hear from the scripture the story of Herod and judge for yourself. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I may also go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen then went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to come back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. When they had gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream. "Get up," he said, "and take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt. Stay there until I tell you, for Herod is going to search for the child to kill him." So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and left for Egypt, where he stayed until the death of Herod. And so it was fulfilled what the Lord had said through the prophet, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi, he was furious, and he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time they had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. "A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping in great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and refusing to be comforted, because they are no more." So after Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, and said, "Get up and take the child and his mother, and go on to the land of Israel, for those who are trying to take the child's life are dead. You know, when I was a boy, going to see those B-Westerns on Saturday afternoon, I knew who the good guys and the bad guys were by the hats the actors wore. The bad guys wore black hats and the good guys wore white hats. It had to be that way because those movies were in black and white. Thus the storyline was the good guys, the white hats, versus the bad guys, the black hats. And in those days, the good guys always won. The cowboy hero put the bad guys in jail or sent them to their just reward without a lot of blood and gore. And of course, the hero always won the pretty girl and rode the fastest horse in the West. Now, everything was well with the world, and as we left the theater and headed for a 15-cent hot dog and a 5-cent Pepsi, I had held Naomi's hand, my wife's hand now, for at least 4 hours, watching my Western heroes. Still had a few nickels in my pocket, for if I was fortunate, and now I was going with her to get the best hot dog in town. I was feeling like the cowboy hero, a winner, had the prettiest girl in town, and though I didn't have a horse, I was floating above the ground. You know, those old B-Westerns were very much the same. The good guys win, the bad guys lose, good meets evil or bad. There was a contest of wills, and the suspense and intrigue were on. Good will good win. This is typical of the modern story of suspense and intrigue. The bad guy has a diabolical scheme. He loves power and position and is jealous of his status as chief, lord of the gang. He is very threatened by the presence of the good guys, especially the good guy's leader. The bad guy desires to eliminate his opposition, the good guy, and leave only himself to control of the empire, so to speak. Greed overrules all reason. He seeks to destroy all who would stand in his way. Now, Herod, the King Herod of our scripture today, represents the bad guy of the Christmas story. Bad guy Herod. Herod is king of the Jews. He's Herod the Great, and he is extremely jealous of his throne. He is threatened by the possibility of another called the King of the Jews, and desires in his dark and troubled heart to eliminate any opposition from his throne. He is the bad guy of Christmas past, worse than Scrooge and Mr. Grinch ever were. You remember the words from the notorious Mr. Grinch? You're a monster, Mr. Grinch. Your heart's an empty hole. Your brain is full of spiders. You've got garlic in your soul, Mr. Grinch. The three words that best describe you are as follows, and I quote, stink, stank, stunk, you nauseate me, Mr. Grinch. Well, you're a monster, Mr. Herod. Your whole heart's an empty hole. You stink and you nauseate me, Mr. Herod. But what about the spirit of Herod at present? Do I dare ask such a question? Is the spirit of Herod a reality today, at the present, in the year of 2021? Does it manifest itself in this time when we have just celebrated Jesus' birth? Have you ever thought about such a spirit at Christmas time and beyond? Now you're asking in your mind, what is the spirit of Herod? If it is a reality, how do we deal with it? Well, let's start understanding the spirit of Herod during the first Christmas. Let's go back to the beginning. You remember the wise men asked the question, where is he that is born King of the Jews? They had seen his star in the east and had come to worship him. Now remember, the wise men did not come to the stable on the night of Jesus' birth. But once the wise men were shown on a Hallmark card, there was no turning back. People who did not know believed the wise men knelt at the manger. But by the time the wise men found Jesus, he was around 2 years of age. The wise men followed the star to a house, not the stable in Bethlehem, and found the Christ child, where they bowed down and worshipped him. Can you imagine how this struck the heart of Herod? How it must have threatened and angered him? Down deep in his evil soul, he was already conspiring as to how he could eliminate this one who was being called the King of the Jews. Remember, Herod didn't have to deal with a right of the aisle or a left of the aisle to get his will done. He was the aisle. How dare anyone else be called a king? How dare anyone suggest or imagine such a preposterous idea? And the spirit of heaven of Herod began to show its diabolical self. Herod was troubled. Why? He was supposed to be the king of the Jews. All Jerusalem was troubled with him, and they don't know what to do. We understand they should have been rejoicing, at least inquisitive, but no, they were disturbed, distressed, and displeased. They knew Herod could make life miserable, even more miserable for them. Their very lives and existence were at stake. Herod's nose was out of joint, and their joints were shaking. Now, Herod needed to talk to someone knowledgeable about the religious affairs and authorities of the Jews. Isn't it interesting that when times get tough, I mean really, really tough, people turn to the religious, frantically asking, what is God saying and doing in all of this? We need some answers that will comfort our troubled souls. Let a huge disaster hit the country and church attendance goes up, but usually it's temporary. As the threat passes, folk tend to settle back into old habits and actions. Well, here Herod is threatened. His kingdom has been challenged. The chief priests and scribes were called in. They were the experts in the religious law. He demanded of them where the Christ, the Messiah, was to be born. Now they knew the prophecy of Micah 5:2 that he was to be born in Bethlehem. Now emboldened by this information, Herod privately called in the wise men. He was the cunning one, a fox camouflaged like a chicken to raid the chicken coop. Men like Herod will take advantage of good men, the good guys, to accomplish their evil deeds. He knows when to wear a black hat or a white hat, whichever fits his evil and perverse plans. Go find him, Herod tells the wise men. Bring me word that I may go and worship him. Oh, the words are so noble, and in themselves it makes a good statement. Have we ever done that? Said the right words, but did not reflect what was in the heart? In this case, the evil desire to kill Jesus is embedded in Herod's soul. The seed of his diabolical plan has taken root in his evil heart, a plan that seeks not to worship Jesus, but to eliminate him. His performance before the wise men is just an act. He is the proverbial wolf in sheep's clothing. Herod didn't want to worship Jesus. He wanted to kill him. Desire to kill, literally, one's opposition. Has that a modern ring to it? Do you think so? Herod became exceedingly angry. His diabolical scheme did not work. He underestimated the good guys. The wise men did not return to Herod. They did not fall for his evil plan. Well, God led them away. Jesus was taken to Egypt. Then the unthinkable happened. Herod commanded the slaying of all 2-year-olds and under. This fits the character of Herod. He had murdered many people, including a son and other relatives, for political reasons. Augustus said he would rather be Herod's pig than his son. The pig had a greater chance of living than a son. Now that is evil personified. We still hear of these horror stories from the Mideast, even parents killing their children over religious differences and violations. In the end, however, Herod dies. The bad guy usually does in the story, and many times he is the victim of his own hatred and greed and lust. Herod was 70 years old, and the 2-year-old Christ child threatened him. Unfortunately, even today, people are still threatened by the reign of Christ. How, did you say? Whenever a person has self on the throne of life, obviously, then Christ is not. Whenever one practices the idolatry of worshiping self, when one thinks more highly of self than one ought to think. No wonder Jesus said that if anyone desires to follow him, they must deny self first. For some, the Christmas message is not welcomed. Someone said, all this talk about Christ sure has ruined Christmas. Well, I'm afraid that's too true to be funny. Modern culture is threatened by Christ and lives out the Manifesto of Anti-Christmas. Now it taunts the Christian celebration of Christ with its politically correct Happy Holidays. The spirit of Herod says, don't break in on my domain. I want to run my own kingdom. I am master of my country. Leave me alone. Let me do things my way. I don't want anyone, including God, to have anything to do with it. It seems that some folks' call to worship is, I am the master of my soul, and their benediction is, I did it my way. Someone said that the word sin should be spelled S, capital I-N. Capital I, worship me. Capital I, idolatry, sin, violation of the first commandment. The spirit of Herod is that spirit that becomes jealous of another one who perceives that the other is greater. The green-eyed monster raised its ugly head, and when it does, destruction usually follows. Jealousy cannot stand a rival. Today, as always, Christ is rival to the big I, the big ego, that craves and demands that others bow to my commands and march to my beat. Jealousy rules out reason and conscience. Destruction and mayhem are just steps away. How unlike John the Baptizer. He said that Jesus must increase, and he, that is, John, must decrease. How powerful the spirit of jealousy. Don't try to move in on my domain. I built this empire for me, and I tend to control it. Hello, Herod. Do we ever feel that Christianity or Christ makes too many demands on us? We bask more in the illusion of ethical conduct, but practice little of it in everyday life. We are sent to higher and noble teachings of Jesus, yet do not let them change us toward Christ-likeness. These demands seem too burdensome. They call for changes in my life, and I do not want to change. Do you recognize that spirit of Herod? And the aftermath is that we seek not so much to neglect Christ, Rather, we seek to reject him completely. That's the spirit of Herod. The spirit of Herod is that spirit that desires to murder its opposition. Herod's solution was to kill the Christ child. That is the spirit of hatred, a desire that seeks to eliminate or wipe out anyone that stands in the way of personal goals that are selfish in nature. Now, folks, this is more than a bah humbug attitude. Ebenezer Scrooge, pre-conversion, was never as evil as Herod, though Scrooge would have never won the Person of the Year award. Scrooge was selfish to a fault beyond that of a man with regard for humanity. Scrooge withheld his money, but Herod was a hit man. He was that kind of despicable man that would, without conscience, put out a contract to have someone murdered, destroyed, wiped off the face of the earth. That was his plan for the Christ child. The spirit of Herod, and without being judgmental here, just might be us at times. Seriously, is there any spirit of Herod in us? That's a harsh statement or question, isn't it? But do we become threatened by the rule of Christ in our lives at times? Do we give lip service deceitfully? Show me the Christ that I may worship him, but never intending to do so. Do we ever put on a mask of piety, looking religious to cover the true conditions and intents of our hearts? Isn't that being deceitful? Saying the right words for the wrong reasons, doing the right thing to gain glory for self or to get my way. 2, we must realize that the spirit of Herod in our lives can kill. Now, some would be saying that's going too far. But yet you think of it. When we parents, guardians, and adults reject Christ, refusing him and his church, we can kill, in quotes, our children's zeal and enthusiasm for Christianity. We can kill their desire for Christ and his kingdom. The way to murder, spiritually speaking, our 2-year-olds and under is to eliminate Christ from ruling in our lives, adults. The spirit of Herod says, do not give the Christ a chance to reign as king. Kill him, get rid of him, no matter the cost. That is why I'm saying that the spirit of Herod must die. Well, Herod died. He could not stop God's purpose and plan. The Christ child must live, to be sure. After the death of Herod, the Christ still lives. After the death of the spirit of Herod, the spirit of Christ lives. But how do we kill the spirit of Herod in our lives so that the spirit of Christ may live and reign? Well, let's take a lesson from the wise men of the first Christmas. Seek Jesus. Go to great lengths if necessary to find him. Fall before him and to worship him. Wise people go to Jesus. Wise people worship him. Note that the wise men did not take the spirit of Herod with them. They went to worship him, not kill him. Now let us, when worshiping him, bring him gifts. Bring gifts of self, material possessions, our talents, skills, and listen to God speak. The wise men were warned by God, and they did as God said. Thus they were not overcome by the spirit of Herod. Rather, they overcame that evil by the Spirit of God. The spirit of Herod dies in us when we obey God, when the Spirit of God lives in us and rules. Herod attempted to destroy the Christ child at the first Christmas. Christmas passed. Today, the spirit of Herod attempts to destroy the Spirit of Christ. If we'll be wise people, we will recognize how the spirit of Herod in us attempts to eliminate Jesus' claim upon our lives. We will, by letting Christ reign in us, destroy the spirit of Herod. This Christmas present, will we let Christ, His Spirit, be our guide for today and all Christmases future? If so, we will have our days filled with the Spirit of Christ today, tomorrow, and beyond. Now may you have a new year that avoids the spirit of Herod, not only this year, but all years to come. I thank you for being a part of the Radio Sunday School class of First Baptist Church in Dunn, North Carolina. We invite you to listen every Sunday morning, and you're invited to attend the worship services, the Sunday school classes, Wednesday night prayer meetings, and other activities of First Baptist Church Dunn. We welcome you. So until next time, good day.